Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and in this show, it might last the whole show. It might just be this segment. It might be a couple segments, but I want to talk about graphics cards. A lot of us out there are PC enthusiasts or gamers or content creators, and the biggest headache of the past several months, at least for the pandemic, for a lot of us, has been access to graphics cards and then pricing of graphics cards when miraculously there is access to graphics cards. So I'm going to talk about GPUs in this show, but first I want to mention real quick, I had brought to light last week that there could be a perceptible change in the way you get Geek Therapy Radio, especially the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. That has not come to fruition. As far as you are concerned and how you get Geek Therapy Radio, nothing has changed, which is a wonderful thing. I will further disclose that a wonderful opportunity has come up for me and my family, so I will be working. I can let the cat out of the bag now. I will be working for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I have put in my resignation here at iHeartMedia, and I have my 2 weeks notice, but they are letting me keep the show, which is awesome, and my eternal thanks to everybody here at the radio station for allowing that to happen. That also means that I am continued to I'm allowed to continue to hosting my podcast through iHeartMedia, through the iHeartMedia Spreaker account. So if you're subscribed to Geek Therapy Radio podcast, which I highly suggest you do so, there are no changes to the way you listen to Geek Therapy Radio. You don't have to research for Geek Therapy Radio. I'm not switching platforms. Everything is status quo on that front. So in your favorite podcast app, of course, we here at iHeartMedia prefer the iHeartMedia app. But whether you use Pocket Casts or Spreaker or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or whatever, and Spotify, just search for the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and there you go. All right, so back to graphics cards, GPUs, if you will, graphics processing units. This is one of the worst times in history to buy graphics cards. And not too long ago, I would say shortly before the pandemic, it was one of the best times in history to build a new PC, period. Right before the pandemic, so late kind of 2019 was primo time to build a PC. And I said this in my radio show and podcast at that time. Right now, if you want to build a PC, do it now, because this is the best time ever. Prices have never been lower. Not entirely because of the competition between AMD and Intel, you know. AMD processors were getting better and better, and that brought the prices of processors from Intel and AMD way down because the competition was so hot. That and RAM prices were low. Solid-state storage prices continue to come down, and solid-state storage is going to continue to come down even from here. Most of the components for your computer, at least right now, barring graphics cards for sure, and to a lesser extent power supplies, most of the components in your PC right now are relatively fairly priced. The pandemic has pushed up the pricing of a lot of these parts slightly. I know power supplies, like I mentioned, have gone up. Motherboards have gone up a little bit, depending. Some motherboards have gone up, some motherboards have come down. But by and large, most components are pretty reasonably priced, except for graphics cards. Now, I'll tell a little anecdote. In this new job that I'm going to do for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, my job is basically video editing. The official title of my job at the museum is going to be YouTube channel manager. So I would say a good 75% of my time, if not more, is literally going to be spent behind a computer screen editing videos together for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. That means I need to upgrade my graphics cards. For those of you who are regular listeners, you know that my graphics cards right now, the most powerful graphics card I have, is from 2014, the GTX 980. And by all accounts, it is still a great graphics card. I am not sneezing at the GTX 980. It has served me well and continues to serve me well. However, If my job, if my 9 to 5, if what I'm being paid salary to do relies on video editing, I need a more recent graphics card. And the graphics card of choice is going to be, at least right now, the RTX 3090. And I know a lot of you PC enthusiasts out there, gamers and content creators right now, have just kind of scoffed. 3090, Johnny? Out of cards that are hard to get. The 3080, the NVIDIA RTX 3080 and 3090 and all the variants of cards, whether it's Founders Edition or third party, are among the hardest cards to get. And if you can get them, they are being scalped for outrageous prices. For instance, Founders Edition of the RTX 3090, it's supposed to be $1,500. That's supposed to be MSRP for the 3090. Good freaking luck finding a 3090 in the first place, and even better freaking luck finding one for under $2,100. I think I have one on the list from Amazon right now. It's from Zotac. It keeps fluctuating. The price keeps going up. When I put it on the list, it was $1,999, so $2,000. I just checked it yesterday. It was $2,099, so it's jumped up $100. It is an exceedingly difficult card to get, the 3080 and the 3090. But I figured, you know what? The GTX 980 that I have is still serviceable at the moment. It doesn't have some of all the, a lot of the latest technology that the new graphics cards have. I don't think it can do H.265 easily, at least. I think that's offloaded a lot to the processor. My processor's fine, 3900X, 12-core, 24-thread, fairly recent on my X570 motherboard, but I need a beefier graphics card because I'm sure I will upload some 1080 content, 1080p content to the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube channel. If my job is making great content, the bulk of it's going to be 4K. And if you are going to be editing 4K, you need a beefy setup. The processor I have is fine. The GTX 980 is going to struggle a bit with 4K. It's doable, but it's going to struggle. 3090 can handle 4K all day long. It's ready for 8K and 12K. I'll explain why resolutions are important for video editing, why you would want an 8K capable graphics card or a 12K capable graphics card when you're only going to be putting out 4K and 1080. I know a lot of you already know the reason for that, why it's important, but I'll explain it in the next segment. But let me tell you my adventure at Micro Center today trying to get a 3090, because it's the experience that a lot of us are sharing. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Go check out geektherapyradio.com if you want to find out more information about Geek Therapy Radio. And contact me. The first thing you see at geektherapyradio.com is a contact form. This does not sign you up for any mailing list or any spam like that. It's literally just to send me a message directly. So geektherapyradio.com to get in touch with me. New email address to hit my inbox without going through even a website first. It's just Johnny, Johnny, at geektherapyradio.com. Johnny at geektherapyradio.com. I won't even mention the old email address because it doesn't matter. Johnny, Johnny, at geektherapyradio.com. Subscribe to the podcast also, Geek Therapy Radio Podcast in your favorite podcast app. Just look for the red, white, and black color scheme. And that's it. The social media plugs, and then we'll get to the graphics cards of my experience at Micro Center. Social media is Geek Therapy Radio, or is it Geek Therapy Radio Podcast? Just type in Geek Therapy Radio into Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. And again, no matter what social platform you're on, no matter if you're on YouTube or whatever, just look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you know you for sure have me, your mental curator here at Geek Therapy Radio. I went to Micro Center this morning. I woke up. My son was still asleep. My little baby boy, Riker, was snoozing. So anybody who's had kids know that when the child sleeps, you take time to do what you need to do. And I took time to do what I needed to do, which was to take a shower. So I woke up, checked my phone while my son was asleep right before getting into the shower. And like a lot of us who are trying to build a gaming PC or upgrade a gaming PC or upgrade our content creation workstation, we keep a few websites on refresh that we keep hitting F5 or refreshing the screen to see if the stores have any more graphics cards in stock. And I did so with Micro Center, and I saw that it said, whoop, it refreshed and said RTX 3090. I think it was it Asus or MSI? I forget. It's not there anymore. This is where all I'm going with this. Is it appeared in Micro Center, at least, and a lot of stores say this, they don't give you an exact quantity of these highly sought after peripherals and highly sought after items. They just say limited quantity because they don't want to create a stir, I guess, or to try to manage people's expectations. Really, it's just to try to get people in the store. But limited quantity either means 1 or 100 or 1,000. In the case of graphics cards, it's probably between 1 and 10. Either way, I thought it's listed in general on the website. That doesn't happen all the time. It's a very rare occurrence that they even list that they have 3090s, let alone any graphics card between 3070, 3080, and 3090. So anyways, I got in the shower and I thought, okay, after I get in my shower, I'll kind of hurry up a little bit and stop by Micro Center on my way to work on the chance if I could miraculously get there in time while they still have a 3090. I hop in my car and I get near Micro Center and I'm at a stoplight close to Micro Center. I think I was on Rice Boulevard. Those of you in Houston know exactly the route to Micro Center I'm talking about. I'm sitting there on Rice Boulevard at a stop sign, and I reach over and my phone is sitting on the seat, so I refresh my Micro Center feed while I am at the stoplight, and okay, 3090 still there. Page refreshes. 3090 still there. There was a, what was it? There were other, like an AMD graphics card had already gone. It was like a 5600 or something like that. It disappeared right underneath it, so someone had scooped that up. But the 3090, still there saying limited quantity at the stoplight, maybe 2 blocks, maybe a quarter mile, if that, from Micro Center. It's like, all right, well, I might actually have a chance here. And the card was listed at like $1,850, $1,850, which is insane. But again, this is for my job. This is what I'm going to be paid full-time to do. This is not just some sort of whim thing. It's going to make my job as a video editor all the easier. So I walk into Micro Center and I'm speed walking. Like I'm impatiently speed walking. Walk into Micro Center all masked up. I do the hand sanitizer. Walked up to the first associate back in the near the computer area. It's like 3090. That's all I said, 3090. And the guy's like, oh, I think we're all out of it. I was like, do you mind if I go back there and we just ask the guy behind the counter in the computer section? He's like, yeah, man, I get it. So we walk back there and the sales associate just goes, cards? And the guy behind the counter is like, nope. So sure enough, I went to my phone and I told him, I said, well, I just walked, a block away here. The 3090 was still showing up, so I thought there might be a chance. And sure enough, I refreshed my phone while I was in the store and the 3090 listing had gone away. So that means I had probably passed somebody who was walking out while I was walking in who had the last 3090. I had missed it by probably 5 to 10 minutes, I'm guessing. Now, I had my expectations managed completely. I thought I was just going to stop by. I was like, you know what? I checked my phone at like 10 a.m. this morning, and it's like by the time I'm checking the phone at 10 a.m. and it's showing that there's a 3090, there's no way. What is the store open? Like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? This stuff is going to be, if there's 3090s there, they're going to be scooped up, by the time the doors open pretty much. So a couple hours after opening, an hour after opening, it's slim. But what gave me a tiny little glimmer of hope was when I checked it a couple blocks away, and you're still showing limited quantities. And I said, well, there's still a chance, if I was going to check, the reason why I checked at the stoplight is if the listing had disappeared, I would have just continued on to work. But since it still showed that it was available, I figured I'd swing in. And I swing in, like I mentioned, they said they didn't have any, confirmed there weren't any. I refreshed my page just to see if it all coincided, and sure enough, the 3090 disappeared on my refresh. That's an experience that a lot of us have. And honestly, there might be some of you listening right now who say, dang, Johnny, your experience of not getting a 3090 is a lot better, or a 3080 is a lot better than my experience not getting a 3080 or a 3090. I slept outside for 5 or 6 hours in the cold, and by the time they got to my place in line, they were sold out. All I did was, just waltz on in there on a whim and check to see. So the plan going forward is I have the page on my phone and on my desktop that I'm going to check. And if I'm getting off at work around 8 p.m. or something like that, or just before I go to work, if I see it appear miraculously, I'll keep checking. That's the plan right now. I do, like I mentioned, I have one in my queue in the wish list on Amazon. But what I'm trying to do here is avoid paying hundreds of extra dollars. And which brings me to my next point here. Not even talking about scalpers. One of the issues with getting graphics cards right now is massive supply chain interruption due to the pandemic. They just can't manufacture the cards. These cards are so insanely in demand, but manufacturers, NVIDIA and third-party manufacturers, cannot produce them and get them out enough to meet with demand. That is also one reason why the prices are driven up. This is compounded by the fact that new tariffs have gone into place, further jacking up the prices. I'm going to go over that chart here in a minute so you know exactly what percentages and dollar amounts I'm talking about. You have the tariffs, and you also have NVIDIA being buttheads, being absolute buttheads. They have set aside $175 million worth of GPU inventory to sell directly to digital currency miners, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that. That's $175 million worth of inventory that would be available to gamers otherwise. Now, the GPUs that they sell to miners, to Bitcoin miners, so to speak, they're not your typical GPUs that you could just use in a gaming rig. For instance, they really don't have any, for the most part, any display outputs. It's literally just a card with a bunch of CUDA cores that you put in a PCI Express slot and just let mine digital currency for you. There's no point to having a video output. Miners will put 4 or 5 of these cards, well, 4 really, 3 to 4 of these cards in a motherboard and just let them mine currency. I won't get into the details of that right now, how that works, but they don't even need it for graphics output. They're not even going to play games on this thing. So the people who actually need it for work, for content creation, and people who just want it for recreation, gamers, can't get them. Pandemic, tariffs, and NVIDIA themselves being buttholes and having sold $175 million worth of inventory before day one to digital currency miners. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Visit geektherapyradio.com for more information and grab the Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast app. Just search for the Geek Therapy Radio podcast and look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and there you go. I am on Spotify now, which has been a big help to a lot of listeners. A lot of you out there are like, when are you going to get on Spotify? I have Spotify. I can listen to you in the car if you're on Spotify. I'm on Spotify now. So I'm very happy to announce that Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Just look for the red, white, and black color scheme. Same thing across all social media, and we're good to go. Email Johnny, JOHNNY, at geektherapyradio.com to get in direct contact with me. Graphics cards. I will briefly mention that AMD is not devoid. You might be thinking, well, if NVIDIA is having all these problems, then right now I just go Team Red. I'll just go get an AMD graphics card. No, they're not as powerful as NVIDIA graphics cards, but the value is definitely way better. For instance, the 6900 XT cost $1,000. Well, MSRP is $1,000, and it's within 80 to 90% as good as an RTX 3090 in most gaming applications. But AMD isn't doing anything shady that I've seen. They're not setting aside hundreds of millions of dollars worth of inventory to sell to Bitcoin miners, for instance. They are just subject to the same tariffs and supply shortages as NVIDIA. They have just not compounded it by shady business practices. But still, good luck getting a high-end AMD graphics cards. It's just almost impossible to find high-end graphics cards of anything. And you might be thinking, well, maybe I'll just get previous generation. Previous generation are still skyrocketing prices, all the way back to, in NVIDIA's case, 10 series cards. So if you want a 1060, 1070, 1080, those prices, look at the used market. There is such a premium on these cards. 2060, 2070, 2080, 2080 Ti, they are all at a massive premium. High-end graphics cards across the board, no matter the generation, as long as it's relatively recent. My GTX 980, I think I was seeing going for $500 to $600. $500 to $600 for a GTX 980 that came out in 2014. That kind of paints a clear picture of what's going on with graphics cards prices right now. Real quick, in a previous segment I mentioned we talk about why resolutions matter, why you would need an 8K capable card when all you're going to do is produce 4K content. We'll get into that in a minute, I promise. But I want to talk about tariffs right now and kind of the issue going on surrounding tariffs. In a nutshell, like the overall kind of takeaway from this is that tariffs are going to pretty dramatically increase the MSRP of prices altogether, up in even over 20% in some cases, which is a lot when you're talking about cards over $1,000. You're talking hundreds of extra dollars for the MSRPs. Those are about to go up soon. It compounds it when you're trying to buy a graphics card, let's say off of a reseller on Amazon, like a small reseller or a small computer shop. Big box stores are going to have the best prices on these graphics cards when the tariffs have already gone into place, but they've already started to price for the tariffs. The big box stores are going to be able to better kind of stay down at that post-tariff MSRP without adding all the overhead to it that scalpers are going to add to it and that smaller retailers are going to add to it. So for instance, the MSRPs of these graphics cards are going to go up. Places like Micro Center and Best Buy are going to be able to, if you can find them on the shelf, better be able to stick to the new post-tariff MSRPs versus scalpers and smaller resellers. So that's kind of my advice, unless you're just rip-loaded with cash. And if you are rip-loaded with cash, you can go on eBay right now and spend thousands of dollars on a 3090. Like, you can still get them if you're willing to pay 1.5 to 3 times as much money for them. I don't encouraging the scalping. As a matter of fact, I thought about that when I walked out of Micro Center. I thought, what if I actually do get the 3090? And what if somebody in the parking lot was like, hey, you spent $1,800, I'll give you $3,000 for that. I know a lot of you thinking, yeah, turn around and sell. That's you're making a lot of money there. Part of me thinking, but I need it for work. You don't understand. I need this card for work. So, and also morally, I just don't want to give in to the scalping. I don't want to be. There's people who want that card and don't have all the money in the world, and it's a stretch. That much money is a stretch, and I just don't want to. I would feel like a goon if I spent list price for this graphics card, in this case $1,800 or so, and then I sold it for $3,000 to somebody in the parking lot. I would feel like I'd feel dirty doing that, because there could be somebody who $1,800 is all they have, and maybe they really want the card, and I guess maybe, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe $3,000 would be worth it. Making $1,200 on the deal would be worth it to them. Either way, it seems kind of slimy to me, and I didn't want to do it. I think mainly it comes back to I need the card. I need the card for work more than I need to make an extra $1,200 right now. Anyways, that's beyond that. That's, we can speculate and talk about that all we want. Back to the tariffs. I want to go over some specifics of these tariffs just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So the tariffs affect different manufacturers differently. So for instance, let's talk about EVGA right now in their 30 series cards. So EVGA, on this list at least, has 2 different versions of the RTX 3090. And if you're just listening on the radio and just tuning in, we're getting to some real nitty-gritty nerd talk with GPUs and graphics cards. I forgive you if some of these naming schemes and stuff go above your head. But we're talking about tariffs. Tariffs apply to a lot of stuff, not just graphics cards, not just computer systems, but they're going to affect a lot of what comes from China, especially here in the next few months. The prices of a lot of stuff are going to go up. So let's get back to EVGA GeForce RTX 30 series graphics card. The first 3090 is the EVGA GeForce RTX 3090 FTW3 Ultra Gaming. FTW stands for the win. FTW3 Ultra Gaming. The November 20th pricing was $1,800, so $1,799. Current pricing is $1,869. This is post-tariff. So post-tariff has affected the pricing of the FTW3 RTX 3090 by 3.9%. Let's just call it a 4% price increase. And remember, we're talking MSRP. This is pre-scalping. The next 3090 is the XC Black gaming card, and its list price was $1,529, so $1,530, which is really close to what the Founders Edition. $1,500 for an RTX 3090 was the benchmark. That was kind of the baseline of where it should have been. Current pricing for the XC3 is $1,599, so it jumped up $70. That's 4.6% post-tariff. So as far as EVGA is concerned with their two 3090 cards, it's let's just call it a roundabout figure of about 4% increase here. 3080s is more of an increase. They have two 3080s, the FTW3 and the XC3. List price for the let's just say the XC3 3080 was $730. Now it's up to $790. That's a $70 increase. That's about 10% of a pricing increase with the tariff. Again, this is MSRP, pre-scalpers. 3070 has gone up from $530, again, talking about the XC3 version of the RTX 3070, $530 to $599. That's a $70 increase, but we're talking about from $530 to $600, so that's actually a 13.2% increase. A 13.2% increase on MSRP post-tariff. Zotac is another third-party manufacturer, and it is going to be hit harder than, or they're going to take a harder hit than EVGA. So for instance, I'm not going to go over everything here, but Zotac has their RTX 3090 Trinity. Its list price December 18th, 2020 was $1,500.50. Current price is $1,900. That is a 22.6% price increase. 22.6% price increase post-tariff. MSRP pre-scalpers. That's nuts. And thus far, that 22% price increase is the biggest single price increase post-tariffs on graphics cards. The rest you go down the line, they have a bunch of 3080s. Zotac has a bunch of 3080s. There's a 12.5% increase, 13% increase, 12% increase. So, for instance, going from $750 to $840, that's 12% increase. $770 to $870, that's a $100 increase. That's 13%. You're going to see these increases across the board post-tariff. And I can't stress enough that this is pre-scalping. Pre-scalping. And this is also just pre-businesses trying to make a profit on it, period. So these smaller resellers, it's not that they're scalping, it's just that they had to pay these prices for them, and they need to turn a profit on it. Maybe they might be getting slightly less, but the thing with tariffs is, tariffs are a tax that is imposed on the country importing them or exporting them. So it's China has to pay extra money to ship these cars to the United States, which means that these manufacturers who manufacture in China are going to add extra price to this because they had to pay just to get it off their shores and onto our shores. The idea here is that you drive more manufacturing to the United States in this instance. We're not going to talk about the politics of it all, but at the end of the day, gamers and content creators and people who rely on these things for their work and for their play get screwed. It's just a bad time right now. Terrible time to get into graphics cards. Let's talk about resolutions and some other kind of geeky stuff concerning graphics cards here in a minute. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator. Go to geektherapyradio.com for more information. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Go to geektherapyradio.com for more information. You can also email me directly, JOHNNY at geektherapyradio.com. That's Johnny at geektherapyradio.com. And find me on all the social media and YouTube. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. YouTube, just look for the red, white, and black color scheme everywhere, whether you're looking for the podcast or the YouTube channel or me on social media. If it's Geek Therapy Radio and it's in red, white, and black, that's me. So before we talk about resolutions and why you'd want an 8K capable card to edit 4K content, video content, I want to talk a little bit about So Tom's Hardware is where I was getting the information of the tariffs and percentages increase and stuff like that. And one of the ads they have kind of promoting one of their videos is running across the bottom of the screen here that I've noticed. And it's tips for getting the right graphics card. And obviously, most of the tips are spot on. I would agree with all of it. But there's one tip that I don't think is aging very well right now. I understand why this tip exists, but it's just in the current climate of procuring graphics cards, it's kind of like, yeah, we see what you're suggesting, but a lot of us are going to throw this advice out the window. And that is, it says, Tom's Hardware's advice is, instead of overclocking a graphics card, just buy a more powerful graphics card. And I cannot help. I love Tom's Hardware, but it makes me kind of throw my head back and laugh. Okay, yeah. Don't overclock, just buy a better graphics card. Okay, gotcha. In an ideal world, maybe that is even conceivably feasible. But guess what? I cannot even get my hands on a 3090 right now, so I am overclocking my GTX 980. I mean, so I understand why they're saying it. It voids warranties. So does, in some cases, it voids warranties. Some graphics cards come overclocked, and you can overclock them further. Overclocking is always a do it at your own risk type thing. You're generating more heat. Heat is bad for components. Do it at your own risk. But I think right freaking now, a lot of people are overclocking their existing graphics cards because they know for a fact that they can't, even if they wanted to, just go out and buy a more powerful graphics card. So, again, love Tom's Hardware. I completely understand where they're coming from with that advice. That advice would work maybe in 2019 in the 20 series of NVIDIA graphics cards. Right now, during the worst launch of graphics cards in history, there's a lot of people that are going to be overclocking. A lot of people that are going to be overclocking to get extra performance out of their graphics cards. Just wanted to get that off my chest. I wonder if you guys agree with that. You can email me, johnny@geektherapyradio.com, or just at me on Twitter or whatever. What do you think? Are you overclocking your graphics card now more than you usually do because you can't get a 3070 or a 3080 or a 3090? I imagine that some of you probably are squeezing the last, bit of performance out of what you already got because you can't get anything better, even if you wanted to. Even if you had $2,000 burning a hole in your pocket, you can't physically come across a graphics card to upgrade to. Anyways, resolutions. So, by and large, the 3090 is overkill for gaming. If you're just going to be gaming at 1080p, 3090 is overkill. Even if you're gaming at 4K, for a lot of games, 3090 is still overkill. It is the most powerful consumer graphics card you can get right now. I'm not talking about prosumer stuff, and I'm not talking professional Quadro cards that can cost over $10,000. I'm talking about consumer cards. 3090 is the current king of the hill. My plan is for the museum to post a lot of 4K content. And eventually down the line, this is very wishful thinking, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, within the next, few years or so, that I could get access to a used 8K camera. Ultimately, I would like to shoot an 8K, possibly 12K. 8K is not the standard. There are very few displays that the average person can afford that display native 8K, and even fewer that can display native 12K. You're not going to be watching 8K content on Netflix. You're not going to be watching 12K content. It is so specialized. But you still want to theoretically edit in 8K because it makes 4K content look better. So let's stick at that figure, 8K. Why would you edit 8K footage to process it out as 4K content? Seems kind of counterintuitive. Seems like a lot of waste of memory and resources. Well, there's a lot of cropping. Very simply, the very simplest reason why you'd want to shoot and edit in 4K is for cropping. You can zoom in a lot better when you shoot in 8K. You can zoom in digitally, I'll say, when you're cropping an image in your editor, so DaVinci Resolve, Vegas, Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, whatever. When you zoom in with a crop after the fact while you're editing, now that 8K goes down to 6K image, goes down to a 5K image, and then a 4K. So you're really zoomed in on the subject. And it's 8K content. When you're really zoomed in, you're still sitting at a native 4K once you're zoomed in that much. You could even go even further. If you upload it at 1080, you can zoom in on a fly's butt cheeks and still be getting a perfect, crisp, clear 1080p image, depending on how good the camera and the lens and the sensor is. But that's the point. You shoot in this higher resolution so that when you do zoom in while you're editing, you still retain all of the resolution for the output format. So if you're outputting 4K, ideally you'd want to be editing with 8K footage. And the 3090 is future-proof in that way. Remember, because the 3090 can handle editing up to 12K footage. The 3090, I should have mentioned this a long time ago. The 3090 has 24 gigs of VRAM. I think the 3080, is it 16 or 12? Let me double check. Oh, it's 10. I was way off. 10 gigabytes of VRAM in the RTX 3080. So in DaVinci Resolve's case, here's what it recommends as far as VRAM is concerned. And VRAM is just the video RAM, random access memory, that is on your graphics card. It has nothing to do really with your system memory, unless it's an APU and it shares the whatever, we won't get into that. So here's the recommendations for VRAM from DaVinci Resolve, which is the video editor that I use. For 1080p resolution timeline, you want a minimum VRAM of 4 gigabytes. So my my GTX 980, it's got 4 gigabytes of GDDR5, I believe it is, VRAM, so I'm good there. 4K, DaVinci recommends 8 gigabytes of VRAM, so even a 3080 would be great for editing 4K footage. 6K and 8K recommends 20 gigabytes plus of VRAM, and the 3090 has 24 gigabytes of VRAM, so it can handle 6K and 8K just fine. I'm sure it can play back 12K, but it's not going to be the smoothest experience, I would imagine, shuffling around that timeline. So I want the 3090 because, remember, I don't upgrade my graphics card too much. I think that now that it's my job, I can honestly see my upgrade path being probably every 2 to 3 years. It's hard for me to imagine a 3090 getting bogged down in the next 2 to 3 years, because I don't think that the standard is going to jump from 4K. I mean, it's arguably barely 4K right now. I don't think 8K is coming down the pipe as a standard in the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to be a long time before I'm uploading 8K content to the museum's YouTube channel. It's not going to happen within the next 2 to 3 years. So I think the 3090 is going to last a very long time. And that's part of I'm justifying in my head. The tariffs suck. The scalpers suck. The fact that you can't get a 3090 for much less than $2,000, even if you're lucky, it sucks, but it's still, I hate this phrase, it is what it is for work. So good luck to anybody else out there looking for a 3080 or a 3090. I'm going to end this broadcast like I end every broadcast and podcast. I need you to know that if you don't listen to anything else I say, you need to know that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of receiving love, you are worthy of giving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. We're all geeks about something. Embrace your geek thing, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care and have a freaking great week. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com and let's talk.